and trim. So that is our next major meeting. We will also have any constitutional offices that wish to make their presentations at that time.
So at this time, the Supervisor of Elections, the Hoots, will submit her budget. You should all have a copy, I believe, in front of you.
Thank you. For the record, excuse me, Supervisor of Elections Brenda Hoots. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As you'll see, my budget is brief and straightforward. If you have any questions.
Ms. Hoots,
Yes.
the insurance increase, that was what y'all felt directly?
Well, as far as we're already high because we're carrying more than we've carried in the last 2 years.
Yes, ma'am.
And then also anticipating a 15% increase.
Gotcha. Capital outlay, you just didn't use it, so you didn't?
I did use it,
Okay.
but I only used a portion of it.
Yes, ma'am.
And so, of course, that will go back, but I didn't request more.
Yes, ma'am. Roger.
You did pretty good.
Thank you, because it's not a lot.
That's the reason you did good.
That's right.
And we'll make those adjustments once we do get the insurance. And when you make your decision on any type of COLA, we'll make those adjustments
Okay.
and all this will change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to the PRM conference this weekend where they let us know our rates, and I'm scared to death, to be honest with you.
Better be.
They usually give a height estimate, like she said, the 15%. We hope that it'll come in lower than that. Last year it was higher. It came at, what'd you say? 10. It came in at 8. So
Yeah, but
it's
the
going to be
property
in the
market's gone
ballpark.
crazy right now.
Right. The sheriff's request, Mr. Kevin Nelson.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kevin Nelson, representing the sheriff who was sick. He's sorry he couldn't be here to talk to you. But, so he sent me. But before I present the budget, I'd like to pass out something for you, just give you an idea of what we're faced with. This email from Sheriff Marcino in Lee County went out last Wednesday to all his employees, who he refers to as family. By Wednesday night, we were having it passed around in our agency.
Thank you.
I'll just give you an idea of what we're faced with as far as trying to keep people here.
It's amazing to be flush with cash. 13.9. That's amazing. Jack.
So as you see, it's hard to compete. It's hard for you all to compete with our neighbors, you know, and we understand that. But like I was telling Jennifer earlier last month, we have to keep up with what you all are doing. You know, the first company that puts their feet down in this airport here, that's going to explode. And you've already rezoned it all to industrial, commercial, and there's 47,000 acres out there that's planned to be developed. You know, tried back a while back, and I think the DEP shot it down or something. But anyway, it's poised for development, and Hilliard owns it, and with, U.S. Sugar, I think, 47,000 acres. It goes all the way to Blaze County line. We don't have just a couple of population centers anymore like it used to be. We have population centers all over the county. We opened up Wheeler Road Estates several years ago so they could build on every lot, and they've been doing it. And it's 18 miles for us to get there because we don't have any way to get there a shorter way. You have to go all the way to Joel to get around there, and it's 18 miles. So that's our response time. There's not enough calls for service out there to justify making a deputy stay there. So, but we try to get in as often as we can to patrol it. The sheriff is looking for more deputies. We need enough deputies that we can place them in zones. Right now, we have 3 or 4 working a shift. If it's full shift, it's 4. Most of the time right now, it's 2 or 3.
When you say 3 or 4, is that county-wide?
No, that's for each
Per-
district.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, each district. We have 2 districts currently. But that means, 3 deputies out there, I don't expect them to spread out. They're going to, for self-preservation, they're going to stay close. And so I can't force them into zones like I'd like to. That's what I'm used to seeing is a zone deputy. In each zone, we have like 4 zones on each side. So it'd be 4 deputies, a rover, and a sergeant. So ideally, right now, with the growth like it is, we could probably get by with that kind of number, and that's what he's asking for, is 11 additional road patrol deputies, which means we need more investigators. So that would be a couple more investigators there. And in jail, we need 5 COs. We're working with the skeleton crew in jail. We have been for a long time. And for their safety and everything else, we need another 5 deputies to spread out over the week. And that's our major increase is for the positions we're asking for. We need them. And we're actually behind. We showed you last year, we're behind the national average by about 70 or 80 deputies as far as population per law enforcement officer. The sheriff will come back and present to you later on in the hearings with a PowerPoint like he did last year. And we'll again use Okeechobee as a model for us to look at. They used to use us until their budget got bigger than ours. But, we're 300 square miles bigger than Okeechobee County, and their budget's going to be about 22 million this year.
So how many deputies, are you still losing deputies?
We're not losing as many as we have lost. I'll tell you what we've done. We have lost all of our experience. Our experienced deputies are leaving. They're making more money in other counties. We've been hiring, like we agreed with you all to hire local people. And so we've been doing that and concentrating on hiring local people, but we have to send them to the academy. So they're in the academy for 6 months. Then they come out and they're in field training for 4 months. And then they're on a year's probation to make sure they're what we want in a law enforcement officer. So we don't really get a good law enforcement officer that we can send out on their own for about a year after they get out of the academy.
How long does he have to stay? Does he have to
They
stay
2 years.
2 years?
After probation.
Then they can leave?
So we get them for about 4 years. 'Cause we use the statutory allowance for trainee deputies. And we have they're trainee deputies while they're in the academy, and they're trainee deputies for the 4 months after they get out. And then after that, they become a probationary deputy, and they have to do a year on probation. And once they get through that, then that 2 years starts. Well, it starts, after they've gotten out of the training.
Is Collier County over Lee County in deputies, price-wise, salary-wise?
Lee County is going to surpass Collier County this
Oh,
year.
they are?
Yeah, but Collier County come right behind them and do it again. They got the money.
So let me address something. So in the letter that the sheriff wrote, on the second page, it says there are many new homes being built and many more in the works. There's the newer development almost directly behind the sheriff's office, as well as the planned 971-unit development going off Helms Road. So those projects are actually in the city of LaBelle, is that correct?
The Holmes Road that they're referring to is in the city.
Right, so then my question is, what is the increased, because you're contracted out to the city of LaBelle to provide law enforcement service, what does that increase look like to them?
They have an assessment, is what they have on rooftops, for law enforcement and fire. I'm not sure about EMS if they get any of that, but, it only increases when new rooftops go up. So it's running around 275 now, isn't that about what it is? About
275,000 a year?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
And it might be a little bit more or a little bit less
So
than that,
they'd have to build out the subdivisions before they receive anything.
but, right.
And we don't know when that's gonna be.
You're saying as those
Come
units come on, that'll increase.
They
Your
will.
contract with them will increase, and that's a direct contract they have with the sheriff's department.
Yeah, it's actually an assessment, like the recreation assessment.
Any idea what that MSBU is? How much per household?
It's not $50, Kevin.
Yeah, it's not much, it's like $50.
$50.
Like, I haven't lived in the city for a while, but
I think it's about 50.
Any questions? Any comments?
Can I just clarify a couple things I think I heard you say? So you were looking for 11 road patrol, 3 investigators, and 5 jail, for a total of 19 new positions?
19 new positions, yes.
Okay.
With
And one
those
of
19,
one
what
of
would you do
those is,
different, Chief
is
Nelson?
The
sorry.
GL contract is going out in October.
Okay.
What would you do different now if you had 19 new deputies? What would you do different than what you're
We
doing
already
now?
have the zones identified. We may have to tweak it a little bit due to growth, but we would have assigned at the beginning of the shift, the deputies will be told what zone they're working. And with this many deputies, all we have is 1 rover sergeant, but they would have to rover the whole district, which is like 600 square miles or something like that. But that way, the response time is greatly reduced, and we can also have a deputy patrol in a smaller area where they can, watch for the thefts, the construction thefts, the cattle thefts, diesel thefts, all the thefts that are going on, burglaries, things like that. You'll hear Lee County talking about, they're doing all this, to make it safer. You cannot control violent crime. You're not going to control it. What we can control is the other crime.
I know that the city, I think they're only short 1. They have filled all their seats. I wish that was us, but my thing of it is if they have filled their seats, then they need to maintain county and not city.
Right.
So, I have a big problem with that.
Right.
With their maintaining city
And
and
we've
not
talked about
county.
that, and I agree 100%, yes. The city needs to patrol the city. We have other
I understand
functions
there's a
that we
need,
do.
if there's a need, they go, but
Yes, ma'am.
when you see them patrolling the city, and if they were short-staffed, that'd be something different, so, okay.
Yep. Yeah, we still have to go into the city for other things, they can't serve warrants, for instance, or civil papers and stuff like that. So we go in there for those things, but, or back them up, and they back us up. They come out of the city and help us too from time to time.
But you understand what
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nelson, how much does it cost to have what does it cost to maintain an inmate in the jail for a year? Do you have a number?
I have our jail administrator here. How much a day is it?
Off the top of my head, I want to say about 80, 90 bucks a day.
Yeah, it's about $90, $88 to $90 a day.
Okay.
Our feed bill, for instance, is just a little bit over $40,000 a month just for the jail. Our fuel bill last month was 44,000. That's 17,000 more than it was May last year. You know, so the costs are going up.
That number does not include healthcare, is that correct?
That was correct.
Okay.
That's after.
How many inmates do you have in the jail, just roughly?
About
Today,
200.
I think it was 207.
207. Out of the 207, how many are non-violent criminals? VOPs, driving while license suspended, multiple, you know.
Not too many. Majority of those get out. The VOPs with no bond, majority of those go fine. We have a lot of violent crimes also.
Yeah, the ones that violate probation, they don't get a bond. The judge makes them sit in jail. You know, I mean, it'd be nice if they got a bond, they could get out and go back to work and, you know, do what they're supposed to be doing maybe, but that's their call. You know, we can't control that. The rest of the misdemeanor stuff, if they qualify for a notice to appear, that's what we do. If they are in the jail, we book them and send them out with a notice to appear in court. If they're out on the street, we don't take them to jail. We issue the notice to appear if they qualify for a notice to appear, and we don't take them to jail. So we can keep the population in a manageable number.
How many days a week are you using the inmate program to do work within the county?
5 to 7.
Yes. During the week, we use trustees 5 days a week. We do almost all the cemeteries, parks. I mean, we're helping Alan do more work than we've ever done ever in Hendry County.
So if you had more staff, could you double down? Could you increase the amount of work? This is the reality. I mean, our cemeteries, and that's one thing that I harp on a lot, our cemeteries aren't in the conditions that they should be. The reality is you guys came out with 5 inmates right before Memorial Day to get Ridgeline where it needed to be. The reality is we needed to have all the cemeteries like that. I'd like to see this, the inmates taking care of all the cemeteries where they look like golf courses, to be honest with you. But the reality is if you have inmates doing manual labor to get out sooner, rather than having iPads and hoodies inside the jail cell with cold air conditioners, which I despise. I know there's a reason behind that, but the reality is if my son sees an inmate doing work on the side of the road, he says, why is that guy in the stripes doing that work? Well, you get your butt in trouble, that's the kind of work you're ending up having to do. That's just my thought, you know, so.
I second that. I would totally agree that would be great for the taxpayers, due to the manpower. I mean, I've been there since 1999, and really, the numbers per shift hasn't even changed yet. I mean, so we're still trying to run the place with numbers from years and years ago.
Right.
Does that take one person when you send them out?
Yes, sir.
One deputy?
Typically, yes. Depends on if they're going to be split up in, you know, other areas or whatever. But the judges also have started up the weekend work program again, too. So they show up, they get right on the bus, go out, pick up trash, clean up whatever, you know, that we need them to do. And then they never come into jail. They just come back and go home.
You still gotta have a deputy with them, right?
Yes.
You know, you have them paint county buildings, just not trim them out. You hire a contractor to come and trim them out, they can paint the main wall. I'm an avid believer about using inmates that are having to pay the time for some minor stuff. It might be habitual, whatever it may be, but they're not violent people. If they get out in the workforce and they can help save taxpayers, and then the reality is you're gonna have them out of your jail sooner, because it might be $32,000, but if they get cancer, they get whatever illness, we're gonna be paying that bill.
Right.
So,
Well, at one point, the inmates were allowed, Allen's workers, when I was there, would take a course, and then they could work the inmates without a deputy. Is that not in effect any longer, or?
That's still in
They,
effect.
they can. Yes, they can.
So I mean,
so
I
our
didn't-
staff,
Our staff. But the issue with that was getting inmates from LaBelle to Clewiston for that work. That's when they was given a deputy, because our employees on the Clewiston side live on the Clewiston side. The employees on the LaBelle side go through the training, and they take inmates out with them. But if you transport them to Clewiston, then it's either probably a deputy again, or a van or something, or Robbie or Cecil or somebody has to bring them to Clewiston. Is that correct?
That is correct. Well, as you know, Cecil does a lot of the work, just transporting the inmates around.
Right.
That's how all the cemeteries are being done, that's how the trash is being changed in Harlem. That's what goes on now. But they're stretched thin. When Cecil's out transporting, no one's at the jail doing the maintenance, because that's his job. But that job's being neglected because he's doing another job. That's what we're at.
That just kind of goes along with if we had the employees that we could put in there for the training, that's going to take stress off of them, and it also takes stress off the county as well. And I agree with you 100%. You're in jail. You're not at the Hilton.
Yeah.
You're in jail. I've been chewed out about the jail many times, having to drink city water. Give me a break. It's city water. It's too hot in there. You're in jail. Stay out of jail. You won't have to drink city water. Stay out of jail. You won't be hot. So I agree with you, Commissioner. I'm with you 100%. We just got to figure out a way to work with them. And the fact is, everything he's saying, you could just about multiply it by the end of this year. It's going to grow. The people that we have coming in steady. Montour is blowing up. Miller Estates is blowing up. Port LaBelle is blowing up. So these numbers, as bad as it sounds, are really not that far out of what we got to start trying to find a way to fund. You know, the impact fees and stuff we're going to talk about later, and the other stuff as well, maybe is a way to do that. But sooner rather than later, we're going to have to face the reality that these men are overwhelmed, men and women are overwhelmed, and for the safety of the public, we're going to have to find a way to fund it.
Y'all been behind for years, haven't you? Just like all of our departments, I feel, right?
Yeah, but we understand that too. That's why we've been, so patient and working with the county. But it's just dangerous. It's dangerous.
Any more comments or questions? Thank you,
Thank you
Chief
for your
Mason.
time.
Jennifer?
Thank you. At this time, we're going to do the fire assessment review. At a previous meeting, we started with a fire assessment presentation, and you can come up, stand. On your iCompass, the updated PowerPoint was loaded for your review. The tables were updated and corrected based off of the information we had last time. It did not, however, affect any of the, other than the 3-year average that he'll go over, that changed the rates that you saw before. But the other updates didn't affect the final recommendation. We'll turn it over to you. Do you have, oh, he's working on it, I'm sorry. Give him a second.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thanks for having me here today. Stan Geber back again, and glad to be here, and glad that we are getting into the understanding of the fire assessments. Go ahead, Ian. Next one. Next. So PFM created the fire assessment for Hendry County. This year, we undertook the analysis to look at the East MSBU and the West Fire MSBU. We revised a methodology for fire impact fee, fire MSBU assessments. The main difference, I think, in this assessment is that we've included capital funding. So we haven't had a dedicated capital funding source for assessments before. As you noted with the Sheriff's Office, and we saw the same kinds of things when we did EMS last year, we don't have dedicated capital amounts in the budget, or we hadn't had them previously, and a lot of the departments are behind in terms of funding. So we asked the fire chiefs to provide to us their capital requirements over a 10-year period, and then we reviewed those with county staff to get a final capital amounts to include in with fire MSBU assessment. We included a detailed analysis of the budgets, conducted interviews with the fire chiefs locally. We did a detailed examination of the property appraiser data so that we were able to identify all the homes and the buildings that would be assessed. We determined a rate for fiscal year 22-23. We also calculated estimated rates based on known budget increases for fiscal year 23-24 and 24-25. There were some variables and changing rates within those 3 years, so it made sense to create a 3-year average. And so the numbers that we're going to present today represent the 3-year average of fiscal 21 through fiscal 24-25. Again, we looked at the two MSBU's. The districts are shown on the map, and they were revised in December of 2021. And so the MSBU's that we used reflect the new geographies for each of those districts. They exclude the municipalities, the city of Clewiston and the city of LaBelle. Back a couple months ago, we came and presented these data to you. We had some difficulties and some inconsistencies with the tax collections and the administrative cost numbers. That's shown in this slide here from April. We revised that. Next slide, please. We revised that and corrected those numbers, as well as added fiscal 2021-22, the most current budget year, just to keep consistent, and allow you to see the trends.
So what did you do different from April to June to show the difference in the tax collector percentage? What did you do different?
There were some budget line items. These charts and tables that you're looking at are a roll-up of 2 or 3 separate geographies, so Pioneer and Felda, plus the city of LaBelle, and then Clewiston and Montura. So there's around 100 to 150 line items. And so there were some incorrect references on those line items, which rolled up into this table, and that's basically the difference. We didn't leave any data out, and most of those errors occurred in the historical year data. In the future years data, we had it a little bit neater, and so mainly the differences were in the prior years, in the historic data.
How confident are you in this report?
Well, I think now we finally got it. I'm much more confident now than I was in December or April of this year. I think we've had, a number of months to review this on my end, as well as internal staff. And I feel pretty good that we've got all of the costs foot. We have a known capital amount. We have appropriately addressed the tax collector fees and other early discount pay fees. So I think it's much better than it was, and I'm much more confident now that we've got it right.
So let me tell you why I asked that question. In our packet, there's a revision for June the 13th that was revised. You probably got a call from our staff. So I found those errors as I'm working through the packet. And for the life of me, I don't understand how we're paying an expert $40,000 to compile a study, analysis, consultation to give us the information. And in our first meeting in April, and then again on Sunday, we're catching errors that, in my opinion, you should have caught and our staff should have caught prior to bringing it to us. The reality is, you can put anything on these papers that you want. As long as the math adds up, we would go forward. Thank God you made some errors, multiple errors, and we gave you 2 months from the last meeting to correct those. So I honestly, I'm disappointed with it. I know I'm a new commissioner. It's probably, I have a hard time with paying consultants to put something together to give us the information that we need, and I don't have the confidence, not any disrespect, but when it's wrong, it's wrong.
No, I think,
You know-
I think that's legitimate criticism, and, I apologize. There's no question that there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different sets of data, and it's taken a lot of analysis. So it's been, it's difficult. It's been difficult for me to accomplish it. So I agree, it's legitimate criticism.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Commissioner Iglesias, so the biggest thing that jumps out at me is, so pick whichever one you want to look at, 6 or 7, okay? The East MSBU budget initial.
You're looking at page 6 or 7, you said?
Oh, so let's say page 6.
Okay.
Are we acknowledging that page 6 had some errors and now the updated is page 7?
Correct.
Okay, next question then, is jumping right to 7, is how do we arrive at the number of, the increase that we see on administrative? I want to drill in on the nuts and bolts unless y'all don't want to. But, looking at an expenditure that in the 18-19 fiscal or 19-20 fiscal is 620, 673, and then you have the percent increase to 810. And, I don't see,
I think if we go to slide 8,
okay?
okay,
And then that breaks that down and goes into it.
yep.
Well, my question is, Jennifer, is then when I look at how we're arriving at our capital number, are we putting that, let me see, let me quote it, 253,786. Did we arrive at that based off of, historical data, and this is what we need to build a budget moving forward, and we haven't done that historically? I think this is where we're hired by the taxpayers to kind of be the fiscal watchdogs, and you have to give the resources, but at the same time we have to be mindful of there's only a finite number of dollars that are able to go around. And I think, Jennifer, you've engaged this conversation. I don't remember if the last agreement was 1979 or
70s.
it was, I don't know this, I was either a gleam in Doyle's eye or Cricket and Doyle had decided to make me, but it was really a long time ago whenever that occurred. And it was kind of shocking to see that. Well, now we're just gonna jump, into the deep end of the pool and put a $300,000 increase on on a budget that historically, I don't know how we arrived at the capital projects. Did we just not do anything? Did we just buy, hats and masks and then baling wire and duct tape, and that's what we did with our trucks to make them run forever? I mean, I don't think we have a truck in there that's under, what's the youngest truck that we have? They're all old.
They're very.
And that's the
the
intent,
fire-
is to put money aside so they're prepared
They're talking
moving
of-
forward.
Just to kind of.
Yeah.
East, so this is east, so this would be Montura.
Yeah.
Okay, so the city of Clewiston figure, and please correct me if I say anything that's incorrect, Ian and Stan. The city of Clewiston figure is our portion, based on the renewed, to your point, agreement. We redid the agreement with the city of Clewiston for fire, because it was in the 70s last time, and we put some restraints in there or clauses in there where it wasn't an open checkbook, because before it pretty much was. And so now we approved their budget. We're going to pay a 5-year rolling average of our unincorporated versus incorporated calls per year. And if they are going to spend more money, they can't do it without our approval. Before, that was not the case, okay? So we did that. So the capital budget for the city of Clewiston, our portion is built into, okay, what we're paying to the city of Clewiston. Is that correct, or did you pull?
And the line item data that were in the city of Clewiston budget really did not include capital expenditures. There was
Okay.
some debt service, which was minimal, on the order of 10 or 20,000 a year, and there was some capital expense on the order of 10 or 20,000 a year. And
Okay.
and those capital expenses are really more like expensive operating kind of expenses. The capital expenses that we're talking about, that we've asked the fire chiefs to provide to us, are fire engines and fire stations and major capital equipment.
So that's for Clewiston and Montura is
That's
what
for all
I'm
of
getting at.
the,
Okay, all right.
all of the sub-districts,
Sure.
yes.
Okay,
The capital number is for
it's
that.
for both.
So that 253,786 that I see recurring now that hasn't been in there ever, that's for Clewiston
And-
proper and East Fire.
Yeah, and Montura.
We're 100% positive about that.
Well, that's what, okay.
Yes.
That's why I was asking.
And the Clewiston portion is only the percentage of the Clewiston budget that
Right.
the county would be responsible for. So City of Clewiston provided us a capital budget, and then we looked at that over the period of time, and then I took the share that only belongs, that percentage share
Right.
of 60.
67% is
That
what it
only
is.
belongs to county,
And then it's 100% Montura, obviously.
correct.
Right.
And the same thing with LaBelle.
And we did take some items out. So on both east and west, there were ladder trucks in both of those requests. And that to me was another discussion outside of this discussion for a later time with this board and potentially the city boards even, to talk about what to do about that situation as we grow and people want to come in and build 3 or 4 stories high. There's different restrictions that we have, obviously, for fire code, and we don't have a ladder truck in Hendry County. And so I've met with our EMS chief on numerous times and had that conversation, you know, when's the last time we ever needed one? Did we ever have to call for one? And you know, those answers are never, 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 no, no, no. But we know that it's coming. And so she has been looking, as we all know, that there's other counties that have equipment that to smaller counties such as ours. And so that's what she's on the hunt for now. And then the city of Clewiston manager, Randy, and myself and Travis had a brief discussion a while back as well about the same thing and said, hey, you know, we were just brainstorming, how could that work? Can we get one? Why do we have to have 2? And then there's other laws about city limits and all that. So everybody's working on that for a future discussion. But with that said, they had their capital request that was included on both sides. We pulled that out and said, okay, everything in there was more today, you know, needed short-term, and then those long-term big dollar value items were going to be a future discussion for your consideration.
The building and growth we have going vertical, that's something we're gonna have to look at sooner rather than later. Between your 3 stories, apartments in LaBelle, you have your new hotel here, we got all kind of growth that way. And when you look at the city of Clewiston, the city of LaBelle, just speaking for almost 20 years, their equipment's in pretty good shape. But when you go to Montura, you go to Pioneer, and you go to Felda, a lot of that equipment drops off fast.
Yeah.
There are trucks out there, some of them, if they get there to your house, you're doing good. So, I mean, that's just reality. They got a lot of bad equipment. I mean, I've been in those fire departments many, many times. So as we're again, you know, this is you don't want to be the commissioner that says we need to raise taxes because no one wants to raise taxes. But we got to find a way to fund these things. The fire safety, not only will it be safety, but it's also your insurance is going to go down, or your homeowners if insurance is. There's a lot of different moving parts here, as you know, in insurance that's gonna make that deficit look a little better on the back end. On the front end, it's kind of horrific. On the back end, it begins to the homeowner, it begins to make sense.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be tough, but we gotta figure out a way to try to get some of this equipment up to date. I mean, in Felda, 2 years ago in Felda, half the life safety equipment was out of date. And we got that donated from other counties, so we really, you know, Pioneer, Montour is the same thing.
That's one of the things we talked about, and I believe that we talked to Jennifer about, you know, looking to see where we can get the funds from to not patch up a none of the equipment to replace it. And we still need to do that. We talked about not patching up everything, but we need to see what we can do to purchase a new truck, a new vehicle, you know.
And there's no grants for that type of equipment?
There are some grants, but most of them
Probably a
are
match.
for full-time fire departments because they will pay for, say, X number of years. Let's just say 3 years, I'm not gonna get it right. And then after that, you have to pick it up because they're more full-time related for personnel and some equipment. Anytime there's an opportunity that is available, though, we do apply.
Could our House reps and senator, could they write a bill as an appropriation for that specific item?
You only get X number of years, so
You
What's
mean-
that?
they only have X number of amounts of things they can write for, so.
Yeah.
You start asking a specific House member to write for a fire truck for a particular region, it gets mighty political mighty quickly.
Okay.
But again, that's not to say that we don't look to not only the neighboring counties, but the counties in North Florida. A few years ago, we picked up a bunch of generators up there. All we had to do was go get them.
Yep.
So there's avenues there. We just need to really start researching each one as diligently as possible. By the way, he's retired. Seth's father retired. He moved on, so the new gentleman in the spot up there is supposed to be a really nice guy, so we'll make sure we meet him too.
You like to continue on?
In the impact fee study, the fire will be in there?
So for impact fees, you can't collect, it's our understanding, you cannot collect an impact fee for something that you already have an MSBU for. Because it's, correct, Margaret? Double dipping, according to statute, correct? Is that, so the study's gonna tell us that, but that's why you have this fire MSBU. And that's why for the impact fees, we have EMS, we're proposing to have, and that's gonna come before you at the meeting later. EMS, public buildings, law enforcement, library, transportation, and those are separate because you don't have MSBU's for those.
In the West MSBU, is that taking in consideration North LaBelle?
Yes. When you say North LaBelle?
Yeah, because we was thinking about putting a truck over there,
Is that in the city of LaBelle or?
North LaBelle.
North of there.
North of
County.
Okay, so it would
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
So that's a pending outcome with Glades County, I think is what you're asking.
The news from Glades County is not good.
No. So we're having separate discussions with the new Glades County manager about the North LaBelle safety complex that you all are aware of. And we've had multiple meetings about that, you know, EMS, fire, and so forth. They were thinking one way, and then they went to their board meeting, and their fire MSBU was not approved, because originally they were proposing to do a fire MSBU, and that was part of their thought process in putting a fire truck over there. Then that wasn't approved, so then that changed things. Of course, we were looking at, remember, doing an EMS MSBU, and we didn't approve that, so that made things look a little different as well. So we've had a couple meetings and further conversations with their staff and trying to figure out potentially just co-locating some of our, you know, they're there, we're there, they cover their stuff, we cover our stuff. We're not proposing to cover Glades County. They're not proposing to cover Hendry County. And so that's kind of where we are right now, and trying to make that figure out. I think that's the easiest potentially thing to do from logistics and other funding issues that we have because of MSBU and the legality of spending funds in other counties and so forth like that. But that's going to come back to you. So we haven't figured out when you say, does this include North LaBelle fire truck? We've talked to the city of LaBelle Fire about that possibility and staging, what we call staging equipment over there in the event that the bridge is closed and there's a fire. And then volunteers would then have the equipment on the north side of the river to be able to utilize it to respond. And that's the way our conversations are going right now.
And so this would be the West MSBU 3-year average for fiscal year 22, 23 through 24, 25. And then again, Commissioners, you had asked for the drilled-in detail on the administrative totals, and so these are the components of that for the West MSBU.
Why is there that much a jump from 21 to 23? 191. 2021, 23, 22, 23, 191.
The 155,875 to 191,686. Is that what you're?
Yeah, administration. 22, 23 is 191,554. 2021 is 23,000.
Does anybody know?
Are you in the,
The administrative category,
What page are you on?
we're on page 9,
Okay.
9.
or you can look at either one.
Oh, this is the old one.
That's the old one.
Yeah, okay, so go to 10.
page 10 would be the updated, corrected?
Well, still your capital is going
Still
from
the
38.5 to 466.
Right, so in
What is that
the,
based upon?
so in the, we talked a little bit before about the budget line items in each of the cities and the county sub-districts, and that we had only minimal capital costs in the prior years because we didn't really have a long-term capital plan at all. So there were some capital costs in the West that we were able to identify. And then going forward from 22, 23 through 25, that represents the capital plan that we put together with the city and the county fire chiefs. I mean, that's the big difference in both districts, sort of in a general sense. I mean, the big change is adding anywhere from $250,000 to $450,000 in capital equipment. 250 or 260 in the east and over 460 in the west. And those are, big ticket items. That represents the annual debt service cost if we were to borrow the money to purchase that equipment over a 10-year period. So we looked at the 10-year needs, we assumed some sort of bond financing, and then we calculated an estimated annual amount that would pay for that capital equipment. So that, and doing it that way, it gives you some flexibility so that you don't have to bond and borrow all at once. You can collect these monies on an average annual basis and hold over some of the collections until you meet the thresholds to actually make the big ticket purchase. So a lot of the, a new fire truck is anywhere from $675,000 to $950,000. So, collecting $400,000 a year, if we borrowed money in year one, we might be able to afford, 2 or 3 new trucks, and then we'll be paying debt service. Otherwise, we can collect $400,000 in a year and purchase the truck in year 2.
So that's an estimated number.
Yes.
What's it estimated upon? You're saying, I understand what you're saying, $38,500 going to $466,000. So there should be some sort of itemization there rather than just a number. Do you have anything that's
Yeah, in the-
buildings, trucks. I mean, I don't see it, so that's what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
in the report appendix, I think, I can't remember which appendix it is, one, two, or three, but all of the capital budgets for the cities and for the sub-districts are in the report appendix. So this is the PowerPoint presentation and you have as well a fully documented report. So this is a summary presentation in the, and Mark, can you tell
Yeah,
me?
so on your board packets, pages 73 and 74, the I-compass page numbering, that would be the 73 is Lewiston and 74 is LaBelle. Now that's the two city fire departments themselves, right?
Right, and there should also be the,
Okay, and 75 is the unincorporated county capital.
yes.
Turn. I'm just asking, is this kind of, yeah. We got a portion of a page in this, so it's kind of hard to
Okay.
follow along with that. That's the reason we're all using paper. It's turned sideways on our iCompass, and I'm not seeing a way to turn it where I can actually read it. Not available, is it? I didn't think so either.
Do you have?
You have a place to turn it, but it won't turn.
you have
Right, I've
multiple
tried to turn it
copies, or
on.
You just have the one. Mine's still,
What do you say, 73?
That's my paper copy, if you want to look at it.
Or you guys-
I'm just gonna make some copies.
Hey, man. Look. Yowza.
Mine's still downloading, actually.
You're on
so-
73?
74, 75.
So we had line items for trucks, we had line items for buildings, we had line items for breathing equipment and apparatus, and everything was shown by year, by type of equipment or type of purchase for each of the jurisdictions.
Go on 73, 74.
So page 7, that's the up-to-date one. Page 7.
Yes, the one that's dated June 13,
For the east.
yes.
So figured in that personnel, is there full-time employees figured in that for the Clewiston side maybe?
That, no, not in the Clewiston side.
Got 150,000,
He's still on page.
it's 22, 23. Then the east, or the west has 55,000.
For employees.
Yeah. And are they all volunteers?
So in
Clewiston, yes, sir.
Clewiston, they're all volunteers, and Randy just walked out. The discussions with him, they have no intention to go full-time anytime soon, as far as.
So does that mean they have that many more calls in the west?
They have volunteers who are able to respond more than the west, I would say. And so in the west side, it's more difficult to have people respond during the day because maybe just geography, people are working in various different places. So on the west side, they're looking to hire some full-time folks and overtime. And so they were, as we talked before, we've already redone the City of Clewiston agreement. And so it's, the City of LaBelle agreement is going to be coming back before you to update the interlocal agreement. And in that agreement, they're going to talk about full-time firefighters for the City of LaBelle. And so
Go ahead.
we peeled that back. They had originally requested 8 or 12 or something like that, right? And so we said, no. This needs to go to our board, and they need to approve that. However, because of these rates, and they're utilizing some full-time staff that they have on the city payroll right now, and they're allowing them to respond during the day for fire calls, if you will. They have other jobs. They're not just there for fire. That's what they're doing now. but we put in,
Well, the city of LaBelle costs go up almost 150,000 from 2022-23 through 23-24. And that's
And
a
that's-
reflection of that.
and it was because, and was it 2 or 4 that we let them include in just those years and then push the rest of it out till we had that
Yeah,
conversation?
it was 3 or 4.
3 or 4.
And then there's also some issues with state requirements of hourly wages going to $15 an hour. So that's in there as well.
Did they, before they did all that talking, did they figure out the cost? Did the city figure the cost out
Yes.
before they started talking?
Well, I can't.
And where was they gonna get the money?
Commissioner Harris, you're saying, like, has the City of LaBelle Commission vetted it and said, we want to do this?
Then you gotta have the money to do
Yes, sir.
it.
Yes, sir.
And they don't have the money.
Okay, so you all have before you the capital sheets.
Yes,
Jamie
ma'am.
passed out.
Where are we at on the, just out of curiosity, because I get a call about this 4 or 5 times a week. Where are we at on the grant that we got for the Montour Station that's never come to fruition? We got a $300,000 grant. We put a doorknob or anything in. I get a call every day that $300,000 is just about going to change a window now compared to what it would have done originally, so.
Do you remember, Ian, were we waiting on the contract or?
I know Jim just started diving into it since he's been hired as project manager.
We have the project manager and that's one of his projects and he's getting started on it, but there was a long lull and I don't know, that might have been rectified with the contract, but there was a long period of time that we were waiting on the state to get the contract back. And I think we might have just got it back. And now Jim is starting to work on it as far as getting the construction part of it. So we're just getting started on it. We can't, as you all know, we can't start any work until we get the documents executed.
So I can answer, on May the 31st from Jim, after the approval from the board, the grant proceedings had to go back to the provider for the next step. I'm working with them to initiate the next step. As soon as I have something,
Okay,
we'll let you know.
so we're still waiting on that.
That 300K is getting down quick.
Right, with the price increases, supply chain, and that's a problem we have with
With a lot of
a lot of different
Yeah, for
funding
sure.
And
sources.
even, we can't even replace the roof now.
It might change here for too long. Forecast ain't looking good.
You're right.
Nope, tomorrow they're going up 0.5%.
They are forecasting it, man. That's gonna slow that old housing bubble down a lot.
Hopefully the supply chain will catch up.
I don't know, man. Input costs are nuts right now. I don't know how a poor old farmer can keep their head above water.
Would you like to continue?
Yeah.
Ride bicycles.
You're welcome to continue.
So on the capital side, just adding it up quickly, we deferred about $3.9 million out of LaBelle and Hendry, I'm sorry, LaBelle and Clewiston. So there's another almost $4 million in capital equipment that we've deferred from this schedule. So the capital numbers that we're looking at, the need is actually significantly higher than what we're showing in the capital assessment.
We'll work to continue on maybe some donated equipment and things like that for those items.
Jennifer, Rescue 2, for example, on the line item there, 2223, page 73. There you go.
This one?
Actually, is it on that one? No, ma'am, go to the other one, the other exhibit, right here. But that truck right there is showing 204K.
Okay.
Yeah. You see it?
Yeah.
All right. So break that down a little bit deeper for me, please.
Amy, can you speak to that?
This is Clewiston's Rescue 2.
Can we have her go to the podium?
Which line item are you speaking of?
Ms. Bird, it's Yes, ma'am, right there.
Okay, thank you.
Rescue two, so in 21-22, Ms. Byrd, the only request they have is a $44,000 request for bunker gear. And then the following fiscal is $204K. And so I'd like to hear y'all's thoughts.
Hi, Amy Stafford, Public Safety Operations Chief. Rescue 2 this is the city of Clewiston.
Yes, ma'am.
Fire Chief Travis Reese, this is his replacement schedule as
Yep.
he would like to see it. So the 204 Rescue 2 is one of their four-door little EMS vehicles that they use. It carries very minimal water, but they can use it to transport. So that's what he's requesting for that year. It's an older truck that he would like to cycle out and get something else. He's done the same over time, like in the 24-25, he's got 600,000 there and hopes to replace his engine 8.
And so 204K, I
With all the
apologize.
bells and whistles, it could be
That's a,
3-4.
it's not $1 million truck? It's not, this is not a fire truck?
This is not an engine. This
Like
is
an
not an
F-450,
engine.
right?
Yeah, it's a four-door F-450 with the boxes on the sides.
Okay.
It may have 200, maybe 500 gallons at the most with a little booster reel on the back and a little mini pumper. It's not an extravagant fire engine.
And its current year, right now, that asset is what year is it right now? Do you know off the hip?
No, I don't know what it is right
Okay.
now, no.
And are they spending any money to maintain it?
And then what is like going all the way to 24-25? What he's saying there on ladder, is
600?
it engine 8?
Engine 8, yeah.
Engine 8.
By that
So-
time, it'll cost more than the 600,000.
600K, so that's an actual fire truck,
Yes.
okay? And so I'm certain those are over 7 figures if you buy it new.
If you buy it new, and you can, I mean, it could be à la carte. He could get every hose, every nozzle, every axe, every SCBA that he wants on it and all of that. This 600,000 is more like your bare minimum
Get a skeleton
out the
and we're
door
gonna
skeleton, and then we'll
outfit it.
take it off of what we currently have and put it on there.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's typically what we try to do, but we could get every bell and whistle that we want on it if we needed to. But this 600 for an engine is actually pretty conservative.
Okay, so now take this, take the city of Clewiston, and if you don't mind, take me to the city of LaBelle's.
So City of LaBelle's is a little bit different. They have a whole different personnel aspect to their capital requests that they are like to add with their adding full-time and increasing that overtime. Their apparatus, new apparatus payment, they didn't break it down by engine, but some of the bigger years, so like year 2 where they have 525, they're looking to replace an engine. And then if you go further out, like year 6, those type of things, they're looking to replace engines then.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. And then if you take me now to ours proper, county, now I could ask you, could you give me those years and dates? And you would be able to tell me those finite details.
Yes.
So if you don't mind, step me through it. Like, on looking at Montura, okay, we see you having a request in there, but it's a need over the next 5 to 10 years. You actually would probably want that much quicker, would you not?
Yes, if it would be allowed quicker, absolutely. Yes, sir, absolutely. Just in reality, in Montura, we got the donated engine from Charlotte. We're expected to get another donated engine after the first of the year from them as well.
So the engine that you got donated from Charlotte, it's what year?
It is a 2006.
Okay, all right. And
It's replacing their backup engine, which was a 1996.
and so did y'all scuttle the 96? Or do y'all keep it there?
We actually still have it in our possession. They just recently got the radios taken off of it this week, and it will be moved from Montura's parking lot to the EMS parking lot to figure out what we're going to do with it.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any value in it?
If you look at a fire engine, they should be rotated out of circulation. Your career departments, every 8 to 10 years, they look to replace their engines completely and get it completely off of their insurance for those purposes.
And those are
So
trucks
you
that
end
are,
up taking that and putting it on Gov Deals, and what it gets, it gets. Or you take it to the fair, the sale here at the Sugar Land auction, and
The auctions.
what it
and-
gets, it gets.
Yes.
Okay. But clearly served a number of years and met its life and then some.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now you have also, though, you have 300,000, you see the gallons there, 300,000, and then a
That's-
station upgrade of 150K. So if you had to sacrifice one of these children and let one of them live, which is the most? And then how's it go second and third? How are you gonna roll that? In your mind's eye?
For Montura specifically, I would say at this point, I would sacrifice the engine and get the tender. We have engines out there. We are in need of a tender. The tender actual truck part is a 1986, I believe. And then the tank itself has multiple holes in it. The pony engine on it creates more smoke than some of the actual fires that they take it to. I don't mean that to be funny, but I've sent her a picture. So that would be my first priority for Montura, would be to get something that has large amount of water. They don't have the utilities. They don't have the water. They literally have a hydrant that's got 2 holding tanks at the back of the station. That's what they fill their trucks with. So they need large bodies of water, large amounts of water to take to the fire so they don't have to run back and forth and those, military 6x and waste time and diesel and all that. So number 1 priority would be that tender for Montura.
That's the 300K request.
Yes.
And at 300K, you're still not buying new. You're buying used with life left on it.
Mm-hmm. We were hoping for a forestry donation. Haven't found one yet, but we're still looking.
Yes, ma'am. And then if you don't mind, I'd just like to take another 5 minutes and roll right into you pick it, Felder or Pioneer, please.
Probably the same at this point. The water. They need something that they can have a lot of
Is
water
efficient,
and take it to
can
the
take
scene.
water and get to
Yeah.
where the fire is and engage it.
Yes, absolutely. Otherwise, they're, let's say they have a fire on Church Road. They're going all the way back to the Felda fire station, filling up with literally 2 holding tanks. And sometimes they have to sit there and wait for those holding tanks to fill up. Or we're calling an outside resource just for water. Just simply for water. A lot of times if Felda is going to call in mutual aid, they call LaBelle, they'll bring an engine, and then they want LaBelle's tender. Same thing, Clewiston or Montura does the same thing for Clewiston. They need that water because they don't have that water source out there.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, I think that in obviously you're the professional in this realm. I think that I'm proud of what we've done as a commission, you all, with the status of the ambulances, Commissioner Harris, when I got on the board and to where we are today. I mean, it seemed like I was passing them more, being pulled by Tim's or Clewiston Towing than they were actually taking people. And I know it's a bit of an exaggeration, but it ain't much. I mean, we were being stranded all the time. I don't hear about that a lot of times with this, but I think it's because of the volume of usage versus the people that are running them and the fact that, they could probably run the space shuttle if they had to, and they can do it with duct tape and baling wire, the guys and girls that are running this stuff. But I would like, Ms. Davis, for you all to engage this from a standpoint of trying to make it a priority of sorts, and then bringing something back to us on how we could look at that, or potentially exercising some of our connections. You talk about Division of Forestry on a brush truck or something like that. I mean, I do think that's something that we could engage that conversation and get a little bit more aggressive on and let them know that we're in need. But, no, I appreciate the education and.
Carson, I reached out to Melissa McKinley. She had told us at that Glades County joint meeting, or the LaBelle joint meeting that we had with Glades County, about helping out. I reached out to her about that tender truck. She reached out to her staff. They didn't have one. She reached out to Dade County and Nikki Freed's office with no avail. But your connection to Charlotte County might be one that we need to work with, or statewide,
Yeah, they have been a wonderful asset, and I'm keeping in the loop with them and contact them about once a month just to kind of look. They've had other things that they've offered to us. I've sent letters and, ask, we have to go through the process, obviously. But anything that we can get, and I try to keep those resources available in Lee County as well. So.
Yeah, maybe during the FAC conference, we can make some headway.
What about Collier County?
Collier's a little bit different. We have a good relationship with them when they're willing to help Immokalee and stuff. They just don't have the resources, to donate like Charlotte is. Charlotte's just recently got a new chief, and they're kind of going through, and they have a really good preventative maintenance program, and that's another big piece to it. Getting something that's been taken care of, that has been taken care of properly, that'll help it last a lot longer. So.
Thank you, ma'am.
So that's the summary of the capital. We did spend a lot of time on understanding it, making sure that we had the correct jurisdictions into the correct areas, and then taking an approach to turn that into some annual, an annual cost that we could roll into the MSBU assessments. So that gives you a summary and an overview of the budget dollars, both on an operating side and a capital side. From there, we need to go to the next step, which is to begin to craft the assessment itself. And so the analysis here is how we actually start to create an assessment based on these budget dollar costs that we have. So in looking through some of the more recent fire assessment, fire MSBU reports throughout the state, there's a trend, that you could do it very simply. Here's the costs, here's the number of houses, divide them up, and there's your cost. The land uses are more detailed than just houses. And the level of usage and demand for fire services by property type is different from property type to property type. So some of the more current MSBU assessment programs that we looked at broke the assessment itself into two pieces. One is a readiness and availability piece, and one is a demand piece. And so the readiness and availability is basically saying, everybody gets the opportunity to have service available. So for any parcel, regardless of land use, regardless of location, regardless of size, if you pick up the phone and you dial 911 and say, I got a fire, somebody is available and ready. There's somebody at the other end of the phone, pick that up. And that's a readiness availability piece of the fee. That's mainly consists of overhead, administration, and the capital cost. The demand side is who is calling and what kind of resources are needed when they call. And so the demand side are the operational costs to physically go out on the road and answer that call. So that's people, salaries, fuel, and operational equipment. And that's the demand piece of the assessment. So that's how we get to the two portions of assessments. The readiness portion of assessment, as we said, it doesn't matter what kind of house or what kind of property or where it's located. If you have a phone line and you call up and somebody answers the phone, we get a response. And so that was allocated on a parcel basis. All parcels are treated the same because the availability and the readiness is the same across all the parcels. The demand for service, which is generated by the salaries, the fuel, and the operational costs to actually go use equipment to fight fires, that's done on an equivalent residential unit basis. So all homes, all residents, all resident housing is treated as one ERU. And then we took the average size of an ERU, equivalent residential unit, and said, if you're twice that size, if you're a commercial building that's twice that size, you get 2 ERUs. So it costs you double because you're twice as big. If you're vacant acres, 1 acre is an ERU. So if you're 100 acres, you get 100 ERUs. So large buildings and large areas get charged more based on the demand for service. So
how does that rotate though? I mean, I just see where that could almost work against them tremendously. I mean, our biggest and best supporters are now potentially being penalized.
You're correct. And so what we there's another layer of the calculation that goes into that, and that's based on the calls for service. So we have portions of the budget which are assigned to readiness and availability, and then on the demand side, we allocate that demand by land use type according to the calls for service. So, houses call a lot more often than a 50,000 square foot warehouse does. 100 acres of vacant residential land barely ever calls at all. There's nobody home. There's nobody out there. So, the assignments for vacant land and for commercial, industrial, and large buildings based on the demand for service are much, much lower, and that gets factored into what the ultimate assessment is. So this analysis, which is the availability and the demand side, is just a way to cut the budget, and then we further cut the demand side based on the calls for service, but based on the actual demand. And that goes into the demand calculation for ERUs. So the effect of that is to mitigate for that concern that you have about penalizing the larger ones. And it effectively does that. So here's the next layer, which is the incidence report. So we looked at a 3-year average of calls for service for all of the sub-areas, Pioneer and Montour and Felda, as well as the unincorporated calls for service by land use type within the cities, from reports from the city departments. And then those calls for service, okay, so basically it was incidence reports allocating that to the demand component. So these are the data. These are the actual data from the East MSBU. So this is 3-year average of the uncorporated Clewiston areas plus the Montour calls for service. And that's the percentage allocation. So you can see, the industrial and the retail restaurants, very, very small percentage of the calls. And so they get a small percentage of that readiness. They get a small percentage of the demand charge. Everybody gets the same readiness charge, but industrial and retail only gets a small piece of the demand charge. Homes and residences, get a significant portion because most of the land use and most of the development in the county is residential. So that's the east. Similarly in the west, we looked at unincorporated calls in LaBelle as well as Pioneer and Felda, and we did the allocations that way. So we then layer in the average charge for the readiness. So this is the way the actual assessment calculates out. So we take the portion of the budget that's assigned to readiness, and we divide it against all of the parcels, the total parcels, which are 10,724, and we come up with a average readiness fee of $57.19 in the east. The demand portion of the budget is then allocated according to is weighted according to the calls for service. And so that's how you get different weightings on a per ERU basis for different land use types. So residential, the demand piece is $52 per ERU, where retail and office, it's only $20 per ERU, because retail and office and industrial really don't call very much. And then finally, vacant land, very, very limited calls for service, and so it's, pennies basically on a per acre basis. So in order, and then, next slide, please. And then we do the same thing, maybe go back to, so that was the west, and this is the one for the east. And so in the east, the readiness, the calls for service and allocated according to how the budgets are described between the readiness portion and the demand portion. So then in the next slide, I gave us some examples for the rate setting, so you can go to the next one. So on the, so the summary is, on the east, we have a readiness so everybody gets a readiness and a demand fee. The readiness and the demand are added together to get the total annual fee. So in the east, that calculates out to $132.71 a year. It compares with the old rate, which is $100. So it's about a $30 a year increase or so. Vacant land was being charged around $30 to $35. Those fees will go up to between $50 and $70. And then retail on an average 10,000 square foot building, the old rate was $605. The new rate is $144. So for large retail and large industrial users, the rates went down because the demand fee is comparatively low, and they have comparatively limited calls for service. That's in the east. And then in the west, similarly, fees went down for retail, went up a little bit for industrial. On the single-family side, the annual rate this year, the existing rate on single-family is $50. The expected three-year average rate for the west would be $96, so around a $46 a year increase, almost doubling the current fire assessment in the west. Next slide. So I think that, that's the summary. That's where the rates calculated out to be. We'd recommend adopting the three-year average rather than, 22 through 25 and changing them year by year. So if we adopt the three-year average, basically we have steady rates for the next 3 years. It reflects capital planning, which we've never had before, and it reflects the budget increases that we're anticipating based on salaries and operational data. And it gives us a fairly current assessment, which is consistent with some of the other studies that we've been looking at across the state, which give us a readiness and readiness availability and demand for service component of that fee. So it kind of brings it up to the modern times, I would say.
West MSBU is almost doubled in every category.
Yeah, the operating and the personnel costs went up, if you go back to.
No, you don't have to go back, I get it, but
Yeah.
they're not gonna see a difference in service, and you're doubling their rates.
Well, in
On the
theory,
east side, well, theory is a good thing, but theory's not a good thing when my house is on fire.
well, I mean, if we're buying the equipment, they get better equipment and better service. And if we pass the assessment, we actually will have the money to purchase that equipment. So I think that's,
On- If I may, on the west side, though, they have built-in,
1.5 compared to.
but they have some built-in full-time folks.
Yeah, 4 potentially.
Four. It's 4 and then 2, 2, 2. I think is the
Again,
way we did
I
it.
hate to be the squeaky wheel, that's great that you have the 4 built in, but that does nothing for Wheeler Estates, that does nothing for Felda, that does nothing for North LaBelle if the bridge is open. but yet we're increasing everybody's rates by double.
But wouldn't they argue that though, that because they have professional full-time, that they're going to serve them? Or are you saying that's just for City of LaBelle?
No, the city of LaBelle, that's a great thing. It's a great thing for the outlying areas, but on the same token, city of LaBelle still has to respond. Right now, they're covering a lot of Felder because there's no one there.
Yes, sir.
So they're not really getting an increase in benefits, but they're going double on their rates.
Their rates going up.
So-
Wheeler right now, we're still doing the same thing. We're, either the city of LaBelle, we have a sort of a situation you're working on with Lee County. But in reality is now, the folks on Wheeler Estates, you could have people on the other side of the county saying, you know what, they're getting full-time fire service, because that station's full-time right down at the end of the road. I'm looking
Lee
at
County
this.
facility.
It's a Lee County facility.
Gotcha.
But it's full-time. So you got, Wheeler Estates is basically gonna get full-time fire service. Felda's not, North LaBelle's not. I'm just looking at all the pros and cons.
Yep.
I understand the graph, I understand every bit of the analysis and every bit of that, but for your person sitting home getting that trim notice, I'm not seeing a benefit here, but I'm seeing a double in taxes value. And I get it. I wanna see it go through as well. I'm just telling you that the calls I'm gonna get in some of those areas, that's what it's gonna be. Mr. Harris is gonna get the same calls. In your Monterey area, you're gonna get some of the same calls. Now, east side, it's really going down in most areas, but on the west side, it's doubling. Everywhere, doubling.
So just for a level of service conversation that I was going to bring to a future meeting, but we'll talk about it a little bit. And then Amy, please maybe walk over so you can jump in. Some discussions that we've been having on our side, but I don't believe, and she'll correct me if I'm wrong, it didn't play into the increase you're talking about, just to be fair. But within our existing budget today, not this proposed budget, we have been working on the possibility, and I needed to bring that to you because it's a policy change, okay, for the unincorporated Montura, Felda, and Pioneer stations to do. LaBelle is requesting to go with some full-time folks because they do not have the people to respond. They've had, and I don't want to speak for them and get anybody, say it wrong, get people excited, but they've had many situations where they have needed response and they did not have anybody to respond. So out of necessity, and it's two totally different conversations with LaBelle and Clewiston, they're two totally different animals, if you will. And so out of necessity, they started years ago, not full-time employees, but they do what they call daily stipends, okay? And they've done it within their existing budget, didn't cost us more money, but they did that and they would say, okay, Johnny and Sue, I don't know who, 2 a day or 1 a day, they would be at the station 5 days a week during the workday to respond. They weren't full-time, they weren't getting benefits, but they give them a daily stipend. And it's worked fairly well with them, right? And so but they're still very stressed because of the growth and the additional calls. So that is how this has evolved in LaBelle with them needing and asking for full-time. Randy has spoken numerous times. They're not interested in doing that. From the county perspective, I'm not interested in wanting to have full-time employees for our fire stations. Mainly because it costs a lot of money. But at the same time, we have to balance a level of service, and we've got to have people respond when they call 911. So we have talked about the idea of doing daily stipends at our unincorporated stations. And what that would do is we have, again, two different animals. We have Montura, and then where we have a lot of volunteers, right? And then we have Pioneer, and we have Felda, where we don't have people to show up. And then LaBelle has to cover. And so, or we have to call in a mock leave for Felda, or Clewiston has to come over and help, even Pioneer or Montura, right? So it's a big problem. So within our existing budget, we are hoping to bring back to you to get approval from a policy change to have a daily person at the station at all of our unincorporated, and the fiscal amount washes out essentially, because then you're not calling, and I'll just peel the Band-Aid off and say it. For Montura, you're not going to have 25 people, right? That's our roster for Montura. 25 people responding to every single call and getting paid for every single call. That they will be there, and if they need additional folks, that goes through dispatch, they will absolutely call them and they will respond. But if it's something that doesn't require everybody to respond, we will reap a savings for the Montura station specifically, and then Pioneer and Felda, we don't have a lot of that anyway, but within the budget itself, it was a wash. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Amy
I
Stafford.
don't want to,
But for those two, you're going to get a guaranteed response.
for level of service,
For
to go
an
to your
increased level of
concern.
service without a significant increase to the budget, as where in Montura, you're going to get that still guaranteed response with a little bit of conserving of some of the fluff.
And in addition to that, if you want to talk real briefly about the, when you have someone at the station, full-time, they're not full-time employees, but, and it'll be different people. And we talked about if there are multiple people in Montura and they want to work, they could go to Felda or Pioneer, right? So it's not about just that station. We will work amongst ourselves to help each other, but it'll also help with the maintenance. If you want to talk about that just for a second.
Yes, again, Amy Stafford. This would allow them to have daily truck checks that aren't getting done now. They would go there and they'd crank the equipment. We would know, they'd have a daily checklist. We'd be able to crank the equipment and know at that time, hey, this isn't working. We can kind of tweak this equipment. We can send it off, as opposed to actually getting to the emergency and not being able to utilize it. The preventative maintenance on the trucks alone, getting them checked on the radios, the station itself, some of the housekeeping issues that come along with that, and having people there on a daily basis. We're not in a place to put people at the unincorporated stations 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The facilities can't handle it, but the benefit that would be seen, and LaBelle has seen that benefit just in that preventative maintenance and having people at the station and what it does for the community. Hey, there's people there today, their kids can stop by, that kind of thing. But having that guaranteed response of 2 people, some emergencies aren't able to be fixed with just those 2, but at least there's 2 people there. They're out the door in 2 minutes, as opposed to, driving 10 or 15 minutes from their home, getting in a truck, waiting for someone else, and then responding to the actual zone. So, and earlier you guys were discussing grants and things like that. Having all of this stuff in place as far as for the housekeeping and the checklists and all of that, if we were to have the state to come in and do inspections and things like that, this is the way that we're going to get those grants. This is the way that we're going to get those guaranteed insurance benefits, is having the ISO come in and do all of that. So, that preventative maintenance, we would know, hey, this is leaking, hey, this isn't working, and we'd be able to get it fixed before they were there and needed it at that time, and it didn't work.
So when would you like to try to implement that and bring it back before the board?
Well, we were just about ready to do it, so it was going to be part of our budget discussions at an additional budget meeting.
How many calls do you have in Wheeler Stack?
I got that on my phone, but I didn't bring it in here.
I know.
I got the information from Lee County.
Is that pretty good?
It wasn't real significant. It really wasn't.
We average about 2 a month, I believe, from an EMS perspective, and a
The
fire is less.
Lehigh still calling on them?
No,
They quit?
so they've refused to respond.
Okay.
So they,
They wanted some big money.
I'll share those numbers with you. I have the numbers from there, and I also have numbers from the city of LaBelle about Felda and Pioneer as well.
Time LaBelle got there, it'd be too late.
Wheeler or Lee County, they wanted like, what, $350 for MSBU? No, 600?
yeah, the one we pulled at
Yeah.
a prior, so we've had discussions with the Lehigh chief since then. We've also had some discussions with the Alva fire, and also Amy's had discussions with the Lee County EMS chief to come up with some other alternatives. We talked about it at our meeting yesterday on the executive level, about some different options. And so we've got a couple different things that that we'll be bringing back to you in the nature of like an MOU or something like that with maybe another agency. From an EMS perspective, however, and we've had the fire chief of LaBelle part of those discussions as well, so he's plugged in. From an EMS discussion, we've talked about staging an ambulance, not just because of the Wheeler issue, but because of the growth that we're seeing in Highway 80 and all of the accidents, if you will, that we have. And so we've been talking about potentially taking one of the existing 3 ambulances that are on the west side of the county and staging it elsewhere other than the EMS station. And it would be, I forget all the minutes, it would carve off
Approximately 10 miles.
10 miles to respond to Wheeler. And so we would be able to get there a lot faster.
But Alva would be a good deal, if you could get Alva.
And again, I'm not opposed to this. I want to see it. I just know what the cost is going to come with it. Because again, they're not going to see the level of service. They're not. And Wheeler Estates, Pioneer, Felda, Monterey, they're not going to see the level change. It's going to be the exact same thing. You know, the road we've been working on, the quicker that road gets there, the quicker a lot of that changes. I mean, we're going to Hendry County and Hendry County. That's something Shane's been working on for a long time. There's just components, moving parts, and he's moving forward on that. But that right there is going to be a game changer as well. It's going to put the resources there a lot quicker than what they are having to go all the way around now. We had the conversation the other day, and I appreciate y'all allowing me to set in that with the chief of LaBelle as well. And there's a lot of good plans going on. There really is. But I just know that when this trim notice goes out, that's exactly what's going to be said. I'm getting double taxed, but I'm not getting nothing for it. So just, you know, you guys, a lot of that's my district, and I can't argue the point. They're getting double taxed and they're not seeing a change in their service. That's what it is. So.
One other comment about that is before we hired a consultant to reevaluate the fire MSBU's, we did a workshop a couple years ago, and I prepared the analysis myself, and West Fire specifically, and I'm sorry I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but West Fire has been operating from a recurring revenue and a recurring expense for a number of years upside down. Now, we're not in the hole of the fund because we had reserve funds as we have in all our, various funds, and we've done that over the years. We did that in the general fund for many years. As we all know, we didn't increase millage and we used our reserves, so we didn't have to do a tax increase. And so for West Fire, that's the case as well. So while this is an increase, we would have had to, even if we didn't change the methodology of this readiness fee versus the usage, we would have looked at an increase, and I apologize, I couldn't give you what that figure would have been regardless. So we can work on that. Tonight, we're going to be asking you to adopt this from a trim rate, and then before we come back later for future budget meetings, we can provide maybe some more analysis to dig a little deeper into these numbers. And of course, you all know we can certainly come down before the September hearings.
Are y'all still doing the ranchettes? Both fire and EMS?
Any more comments? That all you have, Jennifer?
That's it. Thank you.
But the city of LaBelle is not growing yet because they don't have any place to grow. The county is what's growing. In the west, the county, not the city.
That it? Thank you. Meeting's adjourned until 6:30.